welcome to Holy Babble, where I express my thoughts and opinions on culture and religious doctrine that is taught to us in the church and how some of what is taught to us might be more babble than Bible. Today my topic is, where did you get your religion from? Or from whom did you get your religion from? Well, most of us, if you are born into religion, some of us, some others may have found religion later on in life, whether you marry into religion, but you don't just come out of the womb going, wah, wah, I'm blessed, praise the Lord, right? So that is a learned behavior. Your parents are usually your first stop as far as learning anything in life, how to talk, how to read, how to eat, how to sit, whatnot. That also includes religion. Sundays, they're basically your first Sunday school teacher before you even make it into any kind of church. Where did they get their religion from? Where did your parents get their religion from? Who taught them whatever religious values that they believe in? Usually their parents, right? And I'm specifically talking to really African Americans, but this could also, certain parts of this could also stretch over to any other ethnicity. But African American history, if we could trace, thinking of African American history, if we could trace our roots back to the first Africans that were enslaved, because we didn't come out of the womb enslaved, unless you're already in America and your parents were a slave, whatnot. But otherwise, the first enslaved, if you could trace our roots back to the first African that came over that was enslaved, and ask them after they were here for a week, whatever, where did your religion come from, or where did you learn it from? We would get an entirely different answer. Okay. Those first Africans would not be singing Jesus Christ Superstar. Okay? No, sir. After you're forced into slavery, you were also forced to denounce your birth names, your African names. You were forced to renounce your religion, your language, African garb, food. Of course, you're not going to have the same food in America as you had in Africa, at least not right off the bat. But if those enslaved peoples, if they got caught using or doing any of those things, they could be whipped, maimed, killed, etc. For just if they heard somebody speaking in their native language, praying to their God, you could be killed, maimed, hung, all of that. Many of them secretly still tried to hold on to their roots, right? Said don't forget, your name's your grandpa, grandma, mom, dad, religion. We're still here praying. We're still singing songs. They tried to sneak that, right? But for as long as possible, they tried to hold on to their roots and pass that on to each generation. But over time, it's forgotten, right? After so many hundred years of slavery, and you try to pass it on, and then the more you can't say it out loud and practice it, out loud, and in front of all your loved ones and whatnot. You kind of start to keep it. Once you put it in the closet, you start to keep it in the closet, right? Out of it, also for safety reasons. So those with the knowledge, also the old world knowledge, from what they brought over from Africa, also started to die off too, right? As they got older, and basically, eventually, colonization took over later for for future generations. And if you ever seen the movie 12 Years a Slave, they show how the slave drivers and slave masters used the Bible to force slaves. To force slaves into submission by basically so basically what they did was they'd act like they were reading from the Bible, and then make like the Bible was telling, every time the Bible mentioned your Lord and Master, your God, whatever, and acted like the Bible was really saying that the slave driver or the slave master was your Lord, right? Your slave master is your Lord, your Savior, right? And of course, after all, the slaves couldn't read. They didn't know if he was telling the truth. They didn't. And even if they knew he wasn't telling the truth, what were they going to do? They couldn't really speak up on that. Say, that's not true. You lying about that, man. So you can't say that, right? So basically, they made the slave thinking that the Bible talked about the white man. The white man was to be their God. Which I think is kind of shady. They use the Bible to mislead. The first thing you learn about the Bible is misleading. You've been misled by the Bible. So the religion that we are so gung-ho on today came from our slave masters, right? It was not our native religion, but here is the thing along the way. usually the slave master's child, or sometimes an adult would teach, a fairly decent white person somewhere. Sometimes you go off the plantation or do something. Somebody would say, hey, when you come by, I'll teach you a little bit of how to read, English, whatnot, because they had their native tongue, right? So they would teach them English and how to read. Sometimes by that child or adult. And they had to do that on the down low. They couldn't announce, hey, I'm teaching you one of your slaves, so-and-so, how to read, man. You can't say that stuff. It was quiet. It had to keep it on the down low. Because the white person could also be punished for teaching a black person how to read. And that can endanger both of them. So, of course, that enslaved person would try to pass on that knowledge to other, people of color. And here is just a twist in the story. You would think that maybe once these Africans got free, they would denounce Christianity, right? But once once one or two people learned to read the Bible, but once they started, another part of reading the Bible, once they started to read the Bible for themselves after somebody on the down low taught them how to read, they started to realize that all the stuff that slaveholders had told them was not true. That the Bible didn't say what the slave master said. There was nothing about the N-word, blacks being animals or should be segregated in heaven or from other whites on earth, whatever. Or that they were supposed to be good slaves, whatnot. Or they were animals. So the Bible being the first book, people forget that was sometimes the first book black African Americans ever got to read. The first book they were ever come to know. It started to resonate with them. And they could relate to Jesus being, persecuted, along with the Jews, and maybe knowing that they would maybe seeing themselves in that story, thinking maybe they would be free from the persecution of the white man, the slave masters, the slaveholders, right? That hell on earth. Whether it be from, in their afterlife they would be freed, God would free them maybe, or that life on earth, okay? The Bible gave them hope and something to cling to deal with and get through those treacherous times. So even though it was introduced by force, you could kind of say it was later legally adopted as our religion of choice. Okay, so after all, you start to forget your own religion. It's been so many years, and you can't say it out loud. You'll get whipped or killed, but not. So after a while, you say, you know what? This guy in the Bible isn't so bad. He's got good qualities. He's better at least than the people were right in front of us. But the story doesn't stop there. In the 70s, the so-called colored, so-called color folks, as we were known back then, would start to denounce the white name, the names that were given to us when they took away our African names and gave us our slave names, or they're basically white American names, and they started to denounce colored, being called color folks, and we started to call ourselves what? Black. Progression. Remember, now we're African American. Now we're just plain black again. Really, they started to announce that the name colored, Negroes, colored, whatnot. Now we're black, right? And some would also go on to denounce the colonizers, name religion again, by adopting African names, okay, and or becoming a member of the Nation of Islam. Such you could also say that. When we really started, that's kind of the time we kind of really started getting woke. Started realizing, hold on, this is not my real name. This is not the name my mother gave me. This is slave master's name. Or her name's not the name her mother gave her, right? And who was this white Jesus? Really? Am I really supposed to take the word of the white man that this white Jesus, loves everybody? He's a kind guy when his people aren't loving, aren't kind? How am I supposed to show? They try to say, you know what? No, I don't think so. I'm going to choose my religion. I'm going to choose my name. I'm going to choose to wear African garb, And so you could also say that happened in the 70s. And you could also say it kind of came back again into play, you could almost say fairly recently, around the thousands, 2005, where natural hair came back. Lord knows, I wasn't looking like this in the 90s, early 80s. Everybody was trying to perm that hair straight. And now it's like, maybe Corona had something to do with that. People are like, you know what, I feel like I'm free to let my hair go nap again, wear it natural, whatever your natural state is. It's all kind of textures. But people are saying, I feel free just to be, be natural. Some people, maybe, you don't have to be a member of the Nation of Islam to choose an African name. But a lot of people started to name their babies a little bit more African names. Even they weren't quite African, but the people thought they sounded African, so whatnot. But we have been stripped of our culture more than any other ethnic group. A lot of Oriental people still have their Chinese name. Mr. Wong, Cho, whichever. Black folks don't have that. A lot of people still have that. A lot of Hispanics, Colombians still have their language. And if that child doesn't have it, then they know a mother or grandma who still has their native tongue. Black folks don't have, unless you recently came over from Africa, 2000 something, black folks, we don't have our native language. We can go buy some, dashikis and whatnot, but we don't really have our native language anymore either. But so here they were, I'm sorry. But anyway, we have been, so much has been taken from us. And so I think as black people, we have every right to question our religion, where it came from, and decide if that's something we want to carry on doing or not. Okay, we have the right. If anybody should question religion, where did it come from, and do we want to continue on down that path? Definitely us. Okay? Definitely we have the right to do that. And so, anyway, that's how I feel about that, and that I just started to question who's the people telling us this stuff. So that's my thoughts and opinions today on that topic today. Thanks for listening.